Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Buller Show. Today I have with me Kerwin Ray, who's a great friend of mine, and I met Kerwin, 6 or 7 years ago, and the first time I met him, he was this dude on stage at a Brendan Burchard 3-day conference in Sydney, and I was impressed. And he stood on stage and knocked everyone's socks off for about 40 minutes, and then it's the old selling from stage, which Kerwin's a master at. In fact, he's a master salesman. And so I didn't buy your program, by the way, Kerwin. I'm sorry about that. But
clearly not that good, because...
Yeah. Well,
But I did sell you on becoming my friend. So that was, to be fair, that was the best sale I probably made that day.
Exactly. So, we caught up after that, and we became good friends. And we haven't caught up for quite a while, and we can put that down to a variety of things, like you've been crazy busy building a business with 70 to 90 people. Now, when I met you, you had 7 people. So
yeah, correct.
Hats off to you, Kerwin.
Thanks, mate.
You're knocking it out of the park and making a difference, which is great. So what I want to look, let's go straight to, how did you get into all this business coaching stuff? Like, where did it
Totally
all come?
by accident. Yeah, look, totally by accident. I think I fell into it. I don't think anyone, well, actually, no, that's probably not true. A lot of people start out to become a business coach. I certainly didn't. I started a few businesses in my early 20s. And the last business that I had, which was a security business, door-to-door alarms business, it went belly up after about 12 months. And it was quite unfortunate because it was actually quite a successful business. It was very successful, very well run. But unfortunately, the guy that I was in business with, it wasn't just, let's just put it in, it wasn't the best partner. So unfortunately, the business took a big knock, and I ended up becoming unemployed with a massive $200,000 debt at the age of about 23. And then I went and worked. I thought I need to round out my skills, because I thought the only reason I got myself put in that situation is because I didn't understand financials. I didn't know how to read financials. I didn't understand the administration, the operations of the business. And I thought, okay, well, how can I learn, the finance? And I thought, well, I'll just go and get a job at a bank. And I went to get a job at a bank, and long story short, they said, you are absolutely not cut out for the bank. I went through the whole recruitment process. It was kind of funny based on what you're saying with me being a salesperson. I went through the whole recruitment process, the typing speed, the maths and everything else. And everything I was like, dunce. And the last exercise that the recruiters got everyone to go through was a role-playing exercise to sell an insurance product. Now, you've got to understand, at that point, I'd been in sales for quite a few years. I'd owned a direct sales company for the last 12 months, and I'd been training 30 to 40 guys every single day on direct sales. And I was doing role playing every single day, like 5-6 days a week for the last 18 months, 2 years, and 12 months of my own business. And so the moment she said, let's do a role play, I kicked into gear, and she just shit herself. And she's like, oh my God, do that again. I was like, do that again. I did it again. She's like, and she literally ran out of the room, got the CEO of the recruitment firm, got her to sit in front of me and got me to pitch again. And she's just like, why are you going for a job in a bank? This is ludicrous. We could get you a, incredible job, working as a salesperson. I was like, all right, then I've got a massive debt. That sounds great. Long story short, a few days later, they pitched me on a job that was about $180,000 package. And it was all incredibly exciting until they got to the punchline, which they said, so what will I be selling? And they said, oh, you'll be selling stationery. And my heart just sank. And I was like, oh shit. Security I could connect to, because I'm a bit of a warrior spirit, and I love to protect. But stationery, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just can't get motivated to sell stationery. And the lady was like, and again, I didn't realize at the time she had a big commission check on the line, and she was like trying everything under the sun to try and close me. Long story short, she thought she would do a contrast close and offer me a really shit job. And the really shit job that she offered me, which was a $21,000 base, was actually working for Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, I've got the book.
And so I took a job with them, and sure enough, I had a passion for growth and for personal development, and not as deep as what it is now. It was early stages then. And I helped support them drive from a $7 million loss to, I think it was about a $5 million profit in about an 18-month period before I decided to give it all a go again. And it was at that point I realized I loved growing businesses. I loved turning them around. But when I left Covey, or Franklin Covey, yeah, I didn't know so much what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be in business for myself. And it just so happened that the next business that I bought into, you probably remember old Peter's son. I actually bought a license. It was a business, I guess you could call it a business consulting license, where you basically spent $80,000. They gave you a box full of videos and a box full of books. And it was all around how to market a business, how to sell a business, how to run a business. And I consumed all this information, and this license that I'd sold had given me the rights to sell these books, tapes, and audios. And I was just like, oh man, I can't see myself selling these books, tapes, and audios, because first of all, they're really shit quality books, tapes, and audios. But secondly, I love people too much. And so I got involved in the consulting space, and I started consulting to businesses. But back then, this is before business coaching was really even a thing. This is back in 99, 2000. And I started consulting to businesses. I'd already run a couple of businesses myself. And, just through the process of consulting, I started to really enjoy the process. And then lo and behold, once I went to support a friend at one of his events, and he asked me, and there was 12 people at this event, and they said, oh, do you mind standing up? Everyone went around the room and said, stand up, introduce yourself. And I stood up to introduce myself, and I shut the bed. I couldn't speak. I was fumbling my words, and I sat down, and my girlfriend who was with me, she just said, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. I didn't realize that you lacked so much confidence. And I was just like, wow. Because I'd trained like 40 guys at a time, and I didn't really realize that I had a fear of public speaking. It was just in a different context. And so that's when it set me on the path of, public speaking. The next day, I literally picked up the phone at about 8 a.m. I rang 4 different Toastmasters. I joined 4 different Toastmasters, rang the Lennon's Hotel in Brisbane. And I set a date, or bought a room 2 nights back to back, a Tuesday, Wednesday night. And I just started marketing to hairdressers to come and learn how to market their business. And sure enough, that's kind of what got me into the speaking side. And I guess you could say it all kind of snowballed from there. But that was back in 2000.
Wow.
Fuck, that makes me feel old, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, mate, it's one inevitable thing. We're all going to get a little older, and there's only one exit path, really. So
that's right.
That's what we're going to make what we're doing today and our lives actually worth something. So, and you've certainly done that. So you're now business coaching hairdressers. Okay, so that's
at this point, yeah. I kind of the interesting was when I got into consulting. The first, I literally had no money because I'd spent this $80,000 on this license. I had no money left over, enough money to buy a laptop and mobile phone, and I just quit my job. I had no money. I'd paid off all my debts, but I was pretty much clean. And I was like, well, who am I going to fucking market to? And I was like, okay, well, I literally picked up the yellow pages and I opened it at A, and the first thing I saw was A, accountants. And I was like, oh man, these guys have no idea how to market and sell. And so I started targeting the accounting industry. And so it was probably for the first, I'd say 6 to 9 months. I went really hard at accountants, but I just found them a very, very tough business to work with. Very structured. I also, had a lot of great success, but they were a little challenging because I'm quite more creative. And then one of my mates said to me, his girlfriend had a hair salon. And so I started giving her some advice, and sure enough, it worked quite well. And then I thought, well, I might as well go after hairdressers. And I started to realize that creatives are a lot easier to sell to, versus an accountant. And so when I started to consult to hairdressers, I found, wow, this is actually a much easier market. And so when I decided to do a seminar, it just seemed like the easy choice. And I went and a friend of mine had, I don't know if you remember, White Pages Online. Like this is White Pages. It was on a CD disc, and you could download all industry segments. And I downloaded all the industry segments for hairdressers. And I think at the time I sent out 2,000 mailers to hair salons in Brisbane off the back of some advice I'd had from another mentor. I think on the first night I had like 64 people in the room. On the second night I had maybe 70, 74 people in the room. And the first night I didn't make one sale. I had probably at least half the room leave before I finished.
Yep.
And on the second night, I think I closed about maybe $7,000 in sales. And I was like, wow, like that's, that was the easiest $7,000 I think I'd ever made at that point within 90 minutes. And yeah, it was interesting.
So that was your first selling from stage, was selling to hairdressers.
Hairdressers. Oh, God, I know this is going to come back to haunt me, isn't it?
I know. It's, the other thing that I found fascinating is you actually went and I used a database called ACT back in the 1990s.
ACT 5.0. I bought ACT 5.0 on my credit card when I started.
Yeah. And then I remember what I did was I actually bought the when you could get all the phone numbers from the yellow pages on a disc,
Yes.
and what I did is also you could get their fax numbers. So
Yes.
I remember I was so you did a mailer. One of the ways I used to fill my sales funnel was actually doing fax broadcasting back in the 90s.
Absolutely. Well, it had just started, like fax broadcast had just started to die in the arse as I came into the industry. And I did a few fax broadcasts. And I said, I don't know, did this ever happen to you? I did this fax campaign to mechanics. And and I don't remember how you did it, but I did it pretty ghetto style. Like it was basically, old fax machine, running it around. And I did the fax, I programmed in as many numbers as I could. And I walked away, and then I came back, and then my fax machine just kept ringing, but all the paper was empty, and all the paper was black. And what someone had done, has this ever happened to you? Someone had literally, a mechanic, and I didn't realize this was a thing. He had got a black piece or 3 pieces of black paper, fed it through his fax machine, and then turned it around and sticky taped it to itself. So it was like a circle of black paper, and then faxed it back to me. Yeah. And so all he was sending me was pages and pages of black. So it just ate up all the ink in my fax machine. And it's like, that was his fuck you. He sent him a fax.
Well, that's what you call an analog spam filter. That is so cool. God. Yeah. So what I did,
aggressive.
Yeah. Well, what I did was, I created a computer program that ran and dialed and sent a fax automatically overnight. So I actually got a fax machine hooked up to the computer, and I did automated fax broadcasting. So I'd turn up in the morning with 10 or 15 leads. And I was being paid at this time, I was selling corporate ISP subscriptions for one of the first corporate ISPs in Australia called Access One. And so I was impressed with myself, actually, my creativity on this. But
that's pretty, especially in the 90s, mate.
Yeah,
90s, actually owning a PC, number one, but actually building a piece of software that could automate the faxing. Clearly, I wish I'd met you fucking back then, mate.
well, the problem was the fax machine was dying, but it worked back then. It was really cool. I would generate, a lot of sales out of that, and then Access One got bought by Aussie Mail. Who Malcolm Turnbull invested in, and they put me on the package I was on, which is performance-based, no base, and they fired me after 3 months because they didn't want to pay my commissions.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're doing some serious corporate, sales. So, yeah, there you go. So your story's one about the anti-spam analog fax filter. Mine was I was spamming people with fax broadcasting via a computer. So yeah, but yeah,
it was sophisticated spammer.
Well, spam. I was actually selling. It was selling something worthwhile. So it was good. But yeah, so you got the hairdressers. So what's next after the hairdressers, mate? What's going on after that?
Look, I started selling to hair, beauty, a whole range of different industries. But what was the mentor who had sold me the system? He came back to me, or we were in contact for an ongoing period of time. We became good friends, but he was actually becoming quite astounded because I was actually making quite a lot of money. I was actually doing really well, but I was doing it in a consulting fashion, and I wasn't selling. Although when I was doing the seminars, I was selling packages that involved, a manual and a video, but also a one-day event. And then I had to deliver those one-day events. But it was at this point, I started to really identify the leverage, that stage gave you. And I also started to realize that it was a lot more effective to work with people in groups than it was one-on-one.
Yep.
I didn't fully click over that until probably another 10, 12 years later. But at this point I had, my mentor came back to me, he goes, mate, you're doing really well. He goes, why don't you come and join me and help me build my business? And, and so I went back and started working with him and his business partner, and we took that business from 400,000 to about 8 million in about 18 months. Wow. By running seminars all over the country, and offer. And we would run. We got away from fax campaigns at that point. We were doing direct mail, and so the ways that we built that business was through joint ventures. And so we did a lot of joint ventures. We discovered that buying lists back in the early 2000s were as effective as fax campaigns. I remember one campaign I spent $32,000 in total, and that included the purchase of the list. And I can't even remember the list supplier's name. They were an old school, they were around forever. Big, if you said their name, I'll remember them. And then the mail. And back then, I think it was about 80 cents to $1 per mail piece. And we did this massive mail out, 32,000. And we had 2 responses. We had one, how did you get my number or my address? And the other one was, please take me off your list. And so that was a massive lesson, took a massive hit there. But we discovered, identifying other businesses that had similar similar client bases to ours that didn't compete with us, and then approaching them and offering them profit shares in the campaigns that we did was just a real sweet spot. And so the joint ventures really blew it up. That's when I also, because at this point I'd been copywriting now for a couple of years, because I was doing as a little bit of a side gig whilst consulting. I was doing yellow pages ads and classified ads and newspaper ads. And, I wrote a few radio campaigns. And at this point we started doing really big stuff. So full page ads in Sydney Morning Herald, full page or Daily Telegraph, Sydney Morning Herald, all over the country. And I really started to craft the art of copywriting and learning how to write direct response. But because up until that point I'd done direct response copy, but I was doing direct response copy in classifieds. And I don't know if you remember classifieds. It's like AdWords. It's the original AdWords. You got 3-4 lines to put a piece together to get a response, and it's sitting at the back of a newspaper that you're hoping someone will read. In most cases, they flip past the massage section, they've got to you, and so at this point, I started writing bigger and bigger and bigger ads. And when you've got bigger ads, you have to say more words. And yes, it can be more compelling, but you've got to fill that space with stuff. And so that's where I really learned the craft of copywriting. And that was an incredible journey. We built that business quite strongly. And at the end of the 18 months, the guys that I'd done it with decided that the business would work better if they got rid of me, which I understood at the time. I had way too much control in a business that wasn't mine. And I was very young and had a lot of money, and I had a much, much bigger ego than I do right now. And I was probably a lot to handle, but at the same time, they were all the magic ingredients that had driven, a proportionate amount of that success as well. And so they decided that they would be better off without me. And so at that point I took a 6-month sabbatical, ended up being 8 months, and traveled the world. I remember I walked into the flight center just after they gave me the hard word and told me I was out, and I was devastated because, my heart and soul was in this business at the time. It wasn't my business, but my heart and soul was absolutely in it. And I walked into flight center a little bit deluded and with a pocket full of money. And in Burleigh there, they have a big flight center, like all flight centers, or little flight center, but with a big wall with a map of the world. Mm-hmm. And I was going through, I guess you could say, my early stages of some form of an awakening, where I'd gone, okay, well, during this period of 18 months, 2 years, I'd made more money than I'd ever had in my entire life, but I was also just as miserable as I'd ever been. I was just as unhappy. I was healthier, in many respects, but I thought to myself, well, if I know I'll be happier maybe if I just buy a sports car. So I bought 2 sports cars, and the high lasted for a couple of weeks, and then I felt shit again. And then I was like, well, maybe I need to get a beautiful house on the water. And so I got a beautiful house on the water with the guys I was working with, and got an apartment in a beautiful what's it called, the Phoenician. I started dating beautiful women, and I just realized the more I bought things and the more I did things to try and fill what I thought was this unhappiness that would be filled by something outside of me, the more miserable I became in some respects. And so when the guys kicked me out of the business, although I was devastated, that void became a chasm. And I was like, okay, I'm clearly looking in the wrong place maybe. I need to go and find myself. And I'd never had a gap year like a lot of guys that I knew. I'd never taken any time off. Like even when I was at school, I worked 3-4 jobs, and I came straight out of school into security. I was into, protective service. I was a CPO. So my first job out of school was a bodyguard. Right. And that quickly turned into security work in a whole range of different contexts. And so by the time I'd come full circle, I realized, okay, I've tried a lot of stuff. I need to go out there. And I walked into Flight Center. I was like, okay. And I said to the lady behind the counter, where are the most spiritual places on the planet? And she's like, I'm sorry, what? Come again? I said, where are the most spiritual places on the planet? And she was, whilst one girl was looking confused, the other one realized that there was an opportunity, and she just grabbed a notepad and a pen, jumped up, and she goes, Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is really spiritual. And she's like, there's other place in Turkey, the cradle of life in Africa, and she started rattling off. I was like, right, I want to go to Machu Picchu. I want to go to Africa. I want to go to Turkey. I want to go to, and I started, and as she started telling me where these spiritual sites were, she started writing them down. I was like, right, I want to go there, and there. And then so it was maybe 2 weeks later, I took off around the world to find myself. And it's the funniest thing, Jeff, because I still remember Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is a 3-day hike. Have you ever done the hike to
No,
Machu
I
Picchu?
haven't. That's it's on my list when I can get there.
It's look, it's pretty grueling depending on how you do it, because some people catch the train up, but there is a hike, and it is
Right.
at altitude. And so, if you are a little susceptible to altitude sickness, it's a pretty tough little ride. And we had 14 people in our tour group,
Right.
and I convinced everyone that we should treat it like an adventure race and that we should fucking run, and that way we could spend more time at Machu Picchu. And sure enough, oh mate, I nearly killed 3 people from who had altitude sickness, who just pushed themselves way too hard. But the 2 people who finished with me, one was a 62-year-old woman, the other one was a 67-year-old man, and they were the only 2 that finished it with me. And we got
Wow.
we got to the top of the Stargate, the Sun Gate. We saw Machu Picchu reveal herself as the sun came up, and then I walked around Machu Picchu that whole fucking day, looking for some South American yogi, Yoda, guru. I was just waiting for someone to walk out and go, I've been waiting for you. And that was like everywhere I fucking went, I was waiting for someone to come out and go, oh, we've been waiting for you. Come with us. We're going to show you the way. And so by the time I finished this 7-month journey around the world, I had a great time. I had made a lot of great friends and made some incredible memories. But I remember flying back into Australia. I was landing in Sydney, and I still felt a little empty, because I was like, well, I don't feel like I've found myself any more than what I did before I left. And it was literally as the plane touched down in Sydney, it dawned on me, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Maybe because I'd gone from looking in, cars and houses and girls to going, well, maybe I need to travel. Maybe then I'll know who I am.
Yeah.
And as I landed, I literally thought to myself, fuck, I've been looking in the wrong place. I need to start looking inside me. I need to start going inside and stop looking outside. And and that's when things changed. I made that decision. By the time the plane had taxied, I was living in the Gold Coast at the time. By the time the plane had taxied to the terminal, I had decided I was going to move from the Gold Coast to Sydney and just have a red hot crack at starting again and just building a consulting business and seeing where it went.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've revealed something really important that we as humans go through. You were looking for everything on the outside to actually make you happy, wasn't it? So it was chasing stuff, which we especially when we're younger, we tend to do that a lot more. And the thing is, wherever we go, we take ourselves with us.
Mm.
And that's really fascinating in terms of that learning as you flew into Sydney. Was that, what age were you then?
Jesus, that was in about 2003, late 2003, early 2004.
Right.
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So early,
I would have been
late 20s, early
so
30s?
let's call it, let's call it 17 years ago. What am I now? 45. I'm almost 46 now. So yeah, I would have been, gosh, what's that? Take away 17. Yeah, about early 30s, early 30s.
Right.
Maybe 30.
Yeah. Yeah, I was, one of my, I suppose, I was deeply unhappy when I was in my late 20s, and I had a counsellor friend who actually sat me down, and I said, these are the 5 things I think I'm unhappy about. And I'd been looking for everything externally as well. I had a great girlfriend, later became a wife. I had this lovely townhouse in Mossman Bay, one of Sydney's best suburbs. I think that's where you actually live now, isn't it? So I just decided that I needed to confront some of my past, and that was because I'd been brought up in the church, and I'd left the church. So for me, it was. So what was really interesting about that was I was deeply unhappy. I felt like screaming. I remember running down to the point overlooking Sydney Harbour and just screaming at the sky. I was just so desperately unhappy. It was just like I had this huge fog over me, and I just went, I've got to sort this out. So luckily I had a good friend guide, Alan, and he actually later passed away with a brain tumour, but that was about 4 or 5 years later, but just incredibly gifted counsellor. Wow. And he guided me to confront, it was. And I remember that I needed to go and talk to my dad about leaving the church because I decided that I needed to be upfront with him. And I remember flying into Adelaide. We walked and talked and cried that weekend. And what was really fascinating was I told him that, look, I was making a decision for me now. Look, the God I knew, I said, this is the way I phrased it, the God I knew is much bigger than the one I was brought up with. And
I like that a lot.
So, because the God I grew up with was one in a box in what I call formal religion, and I was looking for a spiritual journey as well. And I had to confront my dad, saying, the God I now know, I can no longer fit him in a box. And
But what a blessing to come up in that environment, to have those virtues. Because I grew up in a religious environment as well. I was born into Catholicism. We then migrated into Mahakari, which on some levels is a bit of a cult, then into born again Christianity. And then by age 14, it was Buddhism. And my joke is I'm no longer religious, just fucking confused. But on the flip side of that, I'm very grateful for the virtues that, and I'm very much like you. I don't believe in a God in a box. I think, there's a much bigger source out there, but the virtues that can be received, the perspective that can be perceived when you're not bound by, the dogma, but instead, inspired by the potential of more.
Yes. Yeah, it was the infinity and the possibility of more, and the spiritual journey as well. And I remember flying out that weekend after I'd just had a very honest conversation with Dad. We walked and talked and cried for 2 hours in the Adelaide Hills. And as I flew out on the Sunday, I remember looking out of the window of the plane. I went, I've made a decision for myself. I now felt I was a grown-up for the first time in my life, because I made a decision based upon my beliefs, not what was given to me. But on the other hand, what was really cool was what my parents had given me was the structure and the principles and philosophy of life that has been a big part of my journey as well. So, but I remember looking out the window, and just like this fog just dropped away from me, and I went, I'm a grown-up now. Now, it doesn't mean that life hasn't been tough along the way at different instances, but that was just incredible. The confronting that personal, I suppose, angst, and guided by an incredible friend. So, so it's happiness. It's a big question, isn't it?
Mate, it is. And I think, and it's interesting, especially when you look at the positive psychology studies, and, Tony Hsieh talks about his book, and this in his book, like Delivering Happiness. And he's the guy that built Zappos. People who are already happy, and this is based on in the extensive research I think Martin Seligman did, are 78% more likely to experience greater levels of success in their life, in business, in relationships. But, oftentimes, like I think many people can relate to, I know I did, we put happiness in a box outside that has to be acquired, rather than realizing it's something that is developed, through practice.
Yeah. That's that story you told regarding come flying back to Sydney, I can certainly agree with, and something that I have to remind myself too. Like, more stuff, how busy do you need to be? Is busyness a badge of honor? So busy that you actually are stressed out. So let's get back to you're doing really well. You're selling to hairdressers. You've worked with this other company. You've come back to Sydney. You've moved down to Sydney now. So what happened after that?
Wow. I did a couple of joint ventures. I was just trying to find my feet. I was just trying to find where I belonged in the world. And at this point, I realized that there was an inward journey. I didn't realize how much work that there was going to be required to do, because there was a lot of trauma that I had not really acknowledged or even resolved. But I was just trying lots of aspects of myself on, and I was still in that position where I thought, in order to be successful, that I had to partner with someone. I had to have another business partner. I had to have someone and it was almost like this. I was looking for a leader. I was looking for someone who could lead me. I knew I was good. I knew that I could market. I knew that I could sell. I knew that I could grow businesses quite quickly. I'd had plenty of experience with, the clients that I'd worked with. And at this point, I'd taken interest in a number of different clients' businesses. And so I'd had the experience of consulting to hundreds of different, and at this point, many different, hundreds of different types of businesses. So I knew where my skill sets were. I knew I was good at growing businesses, but I still kept on thinking, I can't do it for me. I have to do it for somebody else. I'll go and take an equity piece in someone's business and I'll blow it up, and I'll go and that's what I basically did. I found another business that I took an equity piece in that was from the UK. It was a franchise company, and it was a company that had been trying to penetrate into Australia for about 2 years, very unsuccessfully. And then I took an equity piece in that company, and then within, it was about 7 months, I blew it up to about 6.9 million in revenue in the first 7 months. And then it became, the largest franchise division of that company, in the world, in Australia, in little old Australia. And that company had, franchises in the UK, it had franchises in the US, and and here was little old me who blew it up in Australia. But what undid me in that was the same thing that had undone me in other things. I'd grown this thing quite quickly, but I was doing it for somebody else. I was doing it at a national level, but I thought, I still can't do this by myself. And so I brought in another business partner to support me on the journey. And sure enough, and this is the thing, I don't want to create this impression that I don't play well with others. I do. I guess you could say I had really shit luck at picking partners in business. And I picked someone who, it was just a really shit luck, unfortunately. And as a result, I ended up walking away from that business. I literally gave it to my business partner after he had basically, created a situation that cost us a huge amount of money from a legal perspective, based on things that he had done. And because of the structure we had, I'd taken on his liability. And so I walked away from that again, starting from pretty much, I wouldn't say from scratch. I walked away from that with money in my pocket, a lot of money in my pocket, but I then took 2 years off. And that was more to go, okay, now I'm going to do this properly. Now I'm going to do this, discovery piece properly. And that's when I took 2 years off. I had a lot of barbecues at my house on the beach I was living in Bungan Beach in the Northern Beaches at the time. I had one of my best mates moved in, and I guess you could say I had 2 years of living in my 18s and 19s. And I got to the point where I literally had liquidated all my free cash. And for me to maintain the lifestyle that I was living at, which wasn't small, I had to start liquidating assets. And I still remember, because at the time I had a mate of mine who was into golf, and I was getting into golf, and I'm a shit golfer. I love golf, but I'm a shit golfer. I'm like, every now and then I just run a fluke. But what I love about golf is the intrinsic connection between psychology and mechanics. Yeah. Because if your psychology is strong, you can have shit mechanics, but you can drive a ball in the right direction. Yeah. And if you can have, the right mechanics and your psychology is shit, you'll in many cases put it in the wrong direction. But when you can get those two things together, oh my God, like the shots just feel magical. And I was playing golf, and I think it was at Long Reef.
Yes.
And all my friends were working. And so, all my friends worked. I didn't work. And I called my semi-retirement phase. And I was on the driving range. I think it was hole 3 on Long Reef Golf Course. And I was with 2 older gentlemen who were, 70 plus. And one of them took this big drive, par 5. And as he took this drive, he just let out this, ooh. And I was like, oh, everything all right, John? And he's like, oh, mate, boys, I'll be right back. I'm just going to have to trot off to the clubhouse. Anyway, it turned out he shit his pants. He drove the ball so hard he shit his pants. And that was funny. But the part that really bothered me was he actually had a men's diaper on that prevented it from being a bad spill. And when I was at this point, I was like, okay, it's Tuesday morning. I'm playing golf. The only people who are available to hang out with are 70 plus, and one just shit their pants. So is this really where you see your life going? And, it was a couple of weeks later, I'd sat down on the beach with my cat. I had a cat that was like a dog. It's a Bengal. It looks like a little leopard. It's quite large. And it used to walk with me on the beach, and I walked down the beach, sat on the beach with a notepad and pen. I was like, right, what do I really love to do? Like, what do you fucking love? Because I've done all this other stuff. I know how to make money. I know how to grow businesses. And this is the thing. I'd made money and grown businesses, but every time I'd done it, something was missing. There was that void. Something wasn't right. And I just didn't love it. And I was making money, but I was miserable. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this again, if I'm going to go in, first of all, I'm going to go in all in on me. I'm going to fucking bet on me. Okay, I'm not going to do it with a partner, but I'm going to do something I genuinely love. Now, going back 2 years previously, when I got out of that business, where I kind of got kicked out, I was very disillusioned with the industry of seminars, because we were involved in the seminar industry. Yeah. And I'd seen the worst of it. I'd seen behind the scenes. I'd worked because of my background in security. I used to go and volunteer at big speaker events and offer my services, as crew. And I'd always get put on security because I had a background as a bodyguard. And so I used to get to see behind the scenes. And I've seen behind the scenes of, some of the biggest speakers on the planet. And I was very disillusioned with what I'd seen. And I'd seen the seminar industry up close in Australia. And I was like, oh my God, this is a shit show. And so when I left, I was like, I'm never fucking going back to that ever again. I just didn't want to be associated with it. And I knew there were good people and there were good pockets, but I'd seen a lot of the negative. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm sitting down on the beach with this yellow notepad, I was like, what do you love to do? And I was like, well, I really love to help people. Okay, well, how do you love to help people? Well, I love to teach and I love to speak. And I'm like, oh, hang on. No, we made a promise to ourselves that we weren't going to go back there. And I kept on asking, but what do you love? I love to teach. I love to speak. And it's like, oh, fuck. Okay. I can't escape this. I go, and the thing was, whenever I took the stage, I used to just come alive. I used to just feel like, oh my God, this is what I'm here to do. And I had enough of those moments to go, this is what I'm here to do. Yes, it ended badly. It was more traumatic because my ego was wounded because I got kicked out of something. But then when I sat there and assessed, I was like, yeah, this is really what I love to do. I really do love to help people. And I want to help as many people as I possibly can. And doing this whole one-on-one business is really going to, slow that down significantly. And I was like, right. And I said to myself, if you're going to fucking get back and start speaking on stage again, there's one deal. I call it the 95-5. You can only talk about the things that you're fucking doing. There's no bullshit. There's no deception. There's none of this fucking smoke and mirrors that I'd been, exposed to that made me feel sick. It was like, if you're going to do this, you can only talk about the 95-5. 95% of what you're talking about can only be the things that you're actually doing or the things that you've done.
Yep.
And I'll give myself 5% to talk about the things that I'm going to do. Okay. But I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to deceive. I'm not going to bullshit. I'm just going to be straight down the line. And that's one of the things I think that is a big part of my brand that people love is I'm very no bullshit. I call things as I see them. I have no filter. And I think that's also because of the fact, I'm on the spectrum. I've got a brother who's quite autistic, but I know, from my own experience that I am on the spectrum. And as a result, I do have some social deficiencies. And one of the social deficiencies that I have is I have no filter and I just fucking say what's on my mind. And people either love that or they hate that. But in most cases, if you do it with a really good heart, they really love it. They appreciate it because, you're like, dude, your breath really fucking stinks. And they're like, oh my God, really? It's like, yeah, have a breath mint. Like, oh my God, no one's told me. So I care enough to tell you, and that was kind of my approach. And then I got back on stage and I remember setting the goal for myself. I was like, well, how much do I need to live? Because I'm not going to go and work like I used to work because I used to work like a workaholic slave master.
Yep.
I was like, okay, well, I only need 250. And I did all my maths and everything else in order to maintain my lifestyle and, continue with what I was doing. I only needed to clear about $250,000 a year. And I remember thinking, fuck, that's nothing. That's easy. And I'll just pace myself. And so sure enough, I went and did an event. And in my first event, I did $275,000. And I was like, well, fuck, what am I going to do with the rest of the 11 months? And I was at that point, I was like, well, I need to do more. And then it was maybe 4 weeks later when I had my stroke.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's when, life changed in a really beautiful way.
Right. So how did the stroke manifest itself?
That's a good question. If you ask the doctors, they'll just throw their hands in the air and say, we have no idea. And I've been seen by so many different specialists during the 2.5 weeks that I was in hospital. But the only thing that makes any sense whatsoever is the night before I had the stroke, I had gone to a discourse from a spiritual teacher who'd come over from the Oneness Temple in India. Right. Now, the Oneness Temple in India is quite a movement over there. And a lot of people travel from all over the world to go over there. Tony Robbins is, very closely affiliated with them. And this young man came over. I think he was maybe 28 years of age, but he'd grown up in the monastery. And so he was a legit monk and they called them a dasa. And he came in and he spent maybe 2.5 hours talking about life, love, spirituality, the internet and consciousness and how they're all intersected and connected. Mm-hmm. And I remember being completely blown away by the wisdom that this 28-year-old, this young Indian man had. He had like a white robe on, and when he came in, I swear to God, he fucking floated in like, he looked like baby Jesus. He was like, he looked like Indian, like black Jesus as he floated in and sat down and he took the stage and sat there. And what was beautiful is the first probably 5 or 6 minutes when he sat down, there was maybe 25 entrepreneurs in the room.
Right. He
didn't say anything. He just looked at everyone and smiled and just went around the room looking at everyone. And I could feel the tension just rising in the room. And it took me a few minutes to work out. I was like, oh, fuck, he's just observing what everyone's doing, observing the situation. He's not feeling the need to add anything or take anything away. He's just observing. So, I'm going to sit with these people and just observe what it's like in this room while there's nothing going on. And, people were starting to shuffle and get uncomfortable and whisper. And then he goes and has his discourse. He shares what he shares. And at the end of it, he goes, look, I'd like to give everyone this diksha. And we call it a diksha. It's a blessing. You Westerners like to call it the oneness blessing because you like to label things based on their scientific meaning. And the reason you Westerners call it a oneness blessing is because we've observed the brain under a fMRI, a functional MRI, and we've observed what happens to the brain in terms of its waves and patterns and activity when we give these blessings. And here's what we've observed. The parietal lobe slows down and the frontal cortex becomes more active. And the parietal lobe is the part of the brain that's responsible for conflict and war. And the frontal lobes is where we believe is the seat of consciousness, sitting around where the third eye is. And I was like, excuse me, I've studied psychology. Well, I've, loosely my own psychology, but obsessively for over a decade at this point. You're telling me there's a part of the brain responsible for war? Yeah, I'm not sure I dig that. And he goes, well, let me explain. The parietal lobe is the part of the brain that's responsible for spatial awareness. It's the part of the brain that, it processes many things. And one of the things that it processes is your spatial awareness so that you know where things are, where other objects are, and you don't fucking bump into everything. Because if you didn't have spatial awareness, you would be literally like a bumper car and you'd be bumping into everything because you wouldn't know where you begin and end. And you wouldn't know where your external world starts and where it finishes. And, you would not be able to see any separation between the two things, which would be quite a psychedelic experience if you could literally press a button and have that removed. He said, so when we give the blessing, the part of the brain becomes less active. So the part of the brain that makes you feel separate becomes softer and weaker. And so as a result, as the frontal cortex becomes more active, you feel more connected. And so that's why the Westerns call it the oneness blessing, because it creates more connection and less separation. And I was like, fuck, dude, wow, you just nailed it. Great explanation.
Yeah.
He stands up, starts giving everyone their blessing. Music is playing, and he puts his hands together. And he puts them over the top of the crown of everyone's head. And he's, he's going through his mantra. And then he gets to me, and I'm in the front. I'm front and center. That's how I show up. I'm front and center. And he gets to me, and his hands start shaking, and I hear his mantra start shaking. And I just peeked open and opened my eyes for a little bit. And I remember thinking to myself, that didn't happen to anybody else. And then sure enough, I went bliss. Now I'm very grateful. I grew up with a mother who, yes, exposed us to a whole range of different ologies in the form of philosophy and religion and scripture, but she was also a very strong psychic and clairvoyant. Right. And so I grew up in an environment where, I was taught how to heal with my hands from the age of 3. Right. I was taught, about, the psychic connection. I was taught how to read tea leaves, taught how to read cards. Not that I can do it now, but I was taught about this energy that if we could access it, there's information there. Mm-hmm. And so I've been exposed to a lot of I'd had my mind open from a very young age, but I'd also had my mum take me to a whole range of different healers. And so I knew the difference between what was a real energy healer and what was just someone who was just having a good old red hot go. And I remember blissing out and just going, oh my God, he's the real deal. And I had this beautiful moment. I can't remember how long it was. It might've been a few minutes later. I came back into the room. I opened my eyes. I looked down at him. He looked at me. He was giving someone else a blessing and he just smiled. And I didn't think anything of it until 3:58 the following day, which is a Tuesday, some random Tuesday. Mm-hmm. I'm in my kitchen talking to my PA, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she just looks at me with this look of fear, and she goes, "Kerwin, I think you need to sit down." And I was like, "Why? Why do I need to sit down? I don't need to sit down." And I was like, "What the fuck? Why am I talking like this?" And then I looked down, and as I looked down, I could just see my tongue and my lips starting to shed, and all this drool just pouring out of my body. And I got a chicken in one hand, I got a bread knife or a carving knife in the other. I put both of them down and I start laughing. I'm like, "Oh, look at this. I'm really laughing." And she's like, "Dude, you need to sit down. Like, I think you're having a healing reaction from whatever you did last night." And she said, "Sit down and ground yourself." And I squatted onto the floor, and there was a tile floor, and the tiles were quite cold. And I remember she said, "Put your hands on the ground to ground yourself." And I put my hands on the ground, and I remember feeling the ground was cold. It was very, very cold floor. But then she's screaming in my left ear, "Kerwin, put both of your hands on the floor." And everything had started to go a little bit slow at this point. And I'm like, both hands are on the floor. But then I looked at my left arm, and my left arm was all twisted up like this. Right. And this is where it got quite freaky, because my right hand was on the floor, but I could feel the floor with my left hand. but my left hand was up here. But I remember feeling the floor, banging the floor with my, my phantom limb, both hands, and going, okay, this is fucking weird, because my hand is here, but I'm feeling the floor with my limb. And it was just like, okay. And at this point I was like, what the hell's going on? And she says, lay down, Kerwin, lay down. And I laid down, and sure enough, everything went black. All I could hear, it was a very NDE, very psychedelic-like experience. Within moments, I could hear multiple conversations going on simultaneously. And I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, I've dialed into the mobile phone network, because all I can hear are all these conversations going on. And I'm like, oh my God. And and my PA, she was a spiritual lady. She was a healer, had been exposed to the healing arts as well. And so she's got one hand over my head and one hand over my heart. I don't know this. She told me this afterwards. And she's crying her eyes out and saying, I'm going to call an ambulance. I'm like, no, don't call an ambulance. Listen. And she's like, listen to what? And I said, the voices. Listen to the voices. And she's just like, I can't imagine what the poor girl was going through.
Oh, God.
But there was this one dominant female voice, and I couldn't quite hear what she said, but then everything went quiet. And I remember just still being quite black. I didn't see any light or anything else. And I remember being given a very clear choice. You can stay or you can go.
Right.
And I remember going very consciously, not from a state of grief or trauma, going, dude, I've lived so many lives in this life. Like, I've done so much. And, Jeff, I know you know some of my story. I've done a lot. And I remember going to myself, if I died, there would be no shame, because I fit a lot into this life.
Yep.
So you know what? If it's my time to go, I'm okay. I'm okay to go. Just before that moment happened, I remember the voices tuned down, and then I started thinking about every question I'd ever had about life, about everything, and all the answers came. I thought about mathematical formulas, the answers came, and I started being giving all these answers. And it took me a while to remember this part, which is why sometimes I overlook it. But I remember just going, oh my God, that's why. 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 And then I got taken to this place. You can stay, you can go. And I remember going, you know what? If I go, there's no shame in me leaving right now, because I've had a great time. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to go. And it was at that point, my eyes opened and I sat right up. And my PA was just like, oh my God, I need to take you to the hospital right now. I said, no, I'm fine. And I stood up, I took 3 steps, I fell down, I went into convulsions. Right. And then my PA wanted to get the ambulance. I'm like, no, we'll get in the car. Took me in the car, took me in the hospital. By the time I got there, early stage diagnosis, the doctors were like, oh, you look fine. I'm like, yeah, well, I feel fine now, but I got this twisting beam of light in the corner of my eye that just won't go away. And they're like, oh, we think you've got epilepsy. We'll send you home. The MRI is full. And another Indian doctor came in and he's like, you know what? Something's not right here. I think we'll send you for a CT. CT came back clear. Mm-hmm. And 2 doctors were arguing. He's got epilepsy. It's not urgent case. We've got other urgent cases. We can send him, we can either put him on a ward or we can send him home and he can come back tomorrow. He looks fine. And the other Indian doctor's like, you know what? Nah, something's not right here. Let's get him into the MRI. Let's force a position in there. And sure enough, the MRI came back and I'd had a 2 3/4 centimeter stroke in my parietal lobe, in the right parietal lobe, which is, and this is documented in the book that the Oneness Temple has put out about the fMRI and how they've observed the parietal lobes slow down, the frontal lobes become more active. And I didn't realize the significance of it at the time, but it was probably 6 weeks later, because the doctors said, because at this point within a matter of hours, I developed short-term memory loss. So I had a 15-second memory. And I couldn't remember anything after 15 seconds. And, the only thing of 15 seconds, I did my joke. The only good thing that a 15-second memory is good for is hiding around Easter eggs. But unfortunately, it wasn't Easter. But every 15 seconds, you hit and I'd be like, oh, fuck, I'm sorry. What were you saying? Could you start again? And it was a real thing. And then I also had syntax errors. Like, I'd go to say one word and other words would pop out of my mouth. I'd be like, that's not what I meant to say. And I'd go to say it again. And I'd be like, oh, man. So the doctor said, look, we don't know. This could be permanent. He said, based on the damage that we can see, we're shocked that you're not severely disabled or severely intellectually disabled, let alone dead. Like, yeah, you are a very, very, very lucky young man, but you will not be working for at least probably 12 months. It's going to be at least 6, 9, 12 months recovery. Give yourself 12 months recovery. And I was back on stage 6 weeks later. Wow. And I always used to get on stage and always used to leave the first 25 minutes of my 90-minute presentation completely free. And I'd just get up on stage and I'd just say whatever came to me, because I'd use that as an opportunity to look at the room and find situational context, to connect with people and read the room and the energy and just add that life to it, to connect with the audience prior to teaching them something really useful. because I discovered that, people are more likely to listen to you if they like you. And so I always use that as a way to connect with the audience. And I remember sitting at the back of this room. I was in Little Collins Street, the Stanford Hotel. I was about to go on stage. I couldn't even remember what the fucking presentation was that I was about to do. But I just remember going, it's okay. You've got a fucking PowerPoint. Even if you'd say nothing, just click the fucking slides. That's all you've got to do. Just click the fucking button. You'll be fine. And I was kind of panicking because I was at the back of the room and I couldn't remember. And I was like, joint ventures. I'm doing joint ventures. And welcome to stage, Kerwin Ray. And I stood up on stage. I came up, walked on stage, and I turned around and I went blank. And the first thing I said is, guys, I hope you can bear with me here. Something that most of you probably wouldn't know is I only 6 weeks ago had a stroke. And I'm not supposed to be here right now. And the room just went, oh. And it was like, you could have heard a pin drop. And I said, so please bear with me. I apologize if I forget where I'm going, because right now I'm having some memory issues. And if I say the wrong words, I apologize, because right now the wrong words are popping out at the wrong time. So if I start swearing like I've got Tourette's, it's okay. That's normal. It's the other stuff that's a little bit unusual. And all of a sudden I started sharing information and drawing diagrams. And I remember as I was sharing it and as I was drawing these diagrams, I remember thinking to myself, whose content is this? This is not my content.
Wow.
And I started talking about psychology and relationships and polarities and energy. And I'd always talked about psychology, but this was a whole nother level of psychology and quantum dynamics and particle physics. And I'd had an interest in quantum physics and particle physics, but I'm like going, I don't remember where the fuck this is coming from. I don't know whose this is. I don't even know if this is, am I making this shit up? Like, is this just stuff that's just pouring out of me because I got a head injury? And anyway, I ended up doing 3/4 of the seminar on this, whatever this came out. And then I quickly got through my joint venture slide, and I got to the back of the room and I got swarmed. And everyone was like, oh my God, what is this content? Where is it from? How can we find out more information? I'm just like, I don't know. I might have made it up. I'm like, I don't know exactly where it's come from. But it just came through me. And again, because I was around people when I was, from 7, 8, 9 who were speaking in tongues. And so I had concepts and I understood, the process of being a vessel and the possibility of channeling. And I was like, okay, maybe I just channeled this from somewhere. I'm not sure where it came from. I'm not sure what channel. Maybe it's MTV. But the next 6 months, as I traveled around Australia and the rest of the world, or actually it was the next 9 months, every time I did a presentation, new stuff would come out at the beginning. And I started documenting it. And then that ended up becoming its own program called Power to Create. And it became the most potent and most original thing that I've ever done. And I teach these concepts now. And I even went to CERN. I even traveled to CERN in Geneva. I interviewed some of the top quantum physicists there. I've reached out to other physicists because I wanted to know what does this information mean? Where does it come from? And is it fucking true? And sure enough, I validated everything. But after about 9 months, I started to realize, and the memory started to come back to me, oh my God, these are the answers to the questions that you asked.
Right.
And it was at that point the penny dropped. And, I've helped a lot of people make a lot of money. There's no question, probably well over in excess of $1 billion or maybe a couple. But the one thing I'm most proud of is the impact that I've been able to have on their psychology, on their self-worth, on their relationships, on their health, on how they are able to relate to themselves first and foremost, but how they relate to other people and the rest of the world. Because one of the things that I discovered, you probably discovered this yourself, Jeff, is, I knew when I was working with businesses, it was like a fucking hit and miss. You'd give two people the same information. One would go and make tens of millions of bucks, and the other one would fuck it up every way to Friday, and they'd blame you. And I started to realize, if I can get people to think the right way, then this information is going to be far more effective. And so I started using the psychology, and started using the performance and using the relationship and the quantum dynamics, and helping people understand, the difference between, helping people understand the process of, what the mystics would call manifestation, but what does that look like from the quantum realm all the way up to the Newtonian realm to the experiential realm? What does that look like? How do we understand the process of form taking place? How do we understand things that disintegrate? And how do we put that into some kind of a context that we can understand to acknowledge our role in how things show up in our life?
Right.
And so for me, that's been a huge part of my journey now. And I joke about this, that, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be the business guy for, because, when I look at my social audiences, 70% of my social audience now aren't even in business. They're people, they're mums, they're dads, they're in relationships. They're just people who want to perform at a high level. And that's probably been the thing that's impacted me the most. And you can probably relate to this, Jeff. People say to me, so why do you do what you do? And I say, well, it's not the same reason now as what it was then. You know, going back way back in the beginning, I grew up, you know, my parents separated, split when I was 6 months old. You know, I grew up with a single mum and a pension. You know, my mum went to remarry when I was 8, and, you know, her fiance was murdered, you know. And so I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of trauma, but there was a lot of void. And the void was around money, because all people I knew had money, but we didn't. And so I thought, if I just make money, then I'll be whole. Made money, wasn't whole. Okay, need sports cars. Now I'm working for sports cars. Bought sports cars, still not whole. Women, still not whole. Property, assets, still not whole. And then when I started doing it for me, I started to find a bigger reason. And so now why I do what I do is combined by the fact that the more I explore myself, the more I get to know who I am, the more joy and the more happiness I have in my life. And it just so happens that I'm able to deconstruct the things that I do from a thought perspective, from a behavioral perspective, in a way that I can share with others and go, well, you've had that problem. I had that problem. Here's what I did. And people go, oh, I'll try that. And they do it. And they go, fuck, that shit works. And now, and this has been happening. And when I started in social 5 years ago, my goal was to how do I take the transformations in my room and how do I share them with the rest of the world? Because I'd have people come into my rooms, you know, who were business owners, and I was reuniting their families. I was, you know, reuniting families in some cases that hadn't spoken forever. I was, you know, helping mentally ill aspects of their self to become better. I was preventing suicides. I was preventing divorces, but I was also building businesses as well. And so I was like, man, I need to share this with the rest of the world. And when we started doing social, and this is where legacy really started to come in. I still remember the first message I received from someone going, Kerwin, I just wanted to send you this message. I didn't know how to. I've been wanting to send it for days now. I just wanted to say thank you. I had planned my day to die, whatever the date was, and I had literally got onto Facebook to say my goodbyes on my day to die, and one of your sponsored videos popped up in my feed, and I watched it, and I went and I flushed the pills down the toilet. Wow. And I went and then I went into my son's room and I hugged him, and I'm like, fuck, this is a parent. And now, you know, I've received thousands of messages from, you know, people who now have relationships with their kids, people who now have better relationships with their partners. But the ones that really get me is when I get messages from people who tell me that they had planned to kill themselves. Yep. Legitimately, they'd planned to kill themselves and they decided not to. Yep. And I know this, you've been affected by this, Jeff, so I know this is a little close to home, so I apologize.
It's all right, it's fine.
But when you realize, because someone said to me, imagine you being taken out of this timeline and your existence not being here. How would that make you feel? And the first thing I thought about was all the parents, all the messages from, you know, mums and dads and people that I'd received who had decided not to take their own life because of a video. And that kids now have a mum, kids now have a dad, they have a brother, they have a sister, they have an auntie, an uncle, a grandma that is still alive just because I fucking decided to film a video about, you know, relationships, or a video about getting to know yourself, or a video around addiction, or a video around, you know, introspection. And when you get that, all of a sudden now it's like, okay, I can't stop because that's now, you know, we get 2 or 3 of those a week now. And you add that up over the last, you know, 5 years, there's hundreds of people that we now have in this world that wouldn't have been here if I hadn't have started producing video content. And so people say, why do you do what you do? And I say, well, it's not the same reason as it was. Yes, I'm very blessed and I get rewarded very well, but I believe that is a dynamic, you know, that is a dynamic of, you know, those who deliver value, energetic value to this world will receive the gifts of the value that they deliver. And, you know, I'm very blessed to receive incredible amounts of gifts, you know, of the financial, material, relational, familial, but at the same time, I give an enormous amount to be able to receive that. And I do a lot of good work.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've watched your journey over the years. I don't know every part of it, but I've seen you evolve, and you're actually doing healing and helping people create at scale. And that's what one of the things that attracted me to social when I started 12 years ago was you can reach the world with your message, which is why, and we're all trying to find out why we're on this fucking planet.
And why am I here?
Yeah, why am I here? And it only took me to 50 to find out why I was here. So, look, what I love, you know, Kerwin, is that you've using social media to scale helping and healing people and help them be the creators and the best human beings they possibly can. And I'm just, I'm so impressed with what you've done, because when I met you, you had 7 people on the team, and today you got 70 or 90. So can you tell me a little bit about how you went, you know, from 7 to 70 people? You're scaling your reach,
Yeah.
and you've done it in incredible ways. So tell us a bit how that happened.
Yeah, look, social played a massive role. We launched the social experiment back in 2016, and the social experiment was basically a docu-series where I had a filmmaker follow me for like 12 hours a day, and he just videoed me 12 hours a day. And the funny thing was, I've been saying for like 15 years, man, I need someone to walk around and film me, because I literally do and say crazy shit, funny shit all the time. But the amount of magic that I have happen around me, I was like, man, someone needs to capture this stuff. And so, yeah, I hired Matthias Helmbaum, who's one of my best friends now. And yeah, he started capturing what I did. And we took those docu-series segments, were like, 10 to 40-minute segments. And then we started creating micro content, 60-second videos, 2-minute videos. And that's when things really started to blow up for us. But I think one of the things that made us scale well is we just didn't scale quickly. As we started to grow, we blew up, and everyone's like, oh my God, you came out of nowhere. I was like, are you serious? I've been fucking slogging for 16 years before, I got any real profile. And, after 16 years of slogging really hard, things started to happen. And we had, because I don't have a lot of products. I don't even have a book yet. I normally have an event that I tour with a couple of times a year, which is called Fast Growth Summit, where I talk about, social media and how to use it to grow business. I have another event that we then have off the back of that, which is called Nail It and Scale It, which is where, we show, the 5 fundamentals that we use to grow and scale businesses quite quickly. And then I have another group called K2 Elite, which is the businesses I work with on an ongoing basis for, in most cases, 12 months to 6 years. And, that's where we create phenomenal. And we currently have about $1 billion of businesses in that team right now. And, as I started to grow, we would open up the FGS and, we'd only have, let's call it, 2,500 seats available, but would have 7,000 people wanting seats, and then would have only 300 seats in the room available for Nissi, but would have like 800 people wanting to buy, and so everything we did sold out. And then when we started K2 Elite, which is where my baby is, every time we'd open the doors to take applications, we'd receive anywhere between, last round we had about 180 people apply, but we'd only take in and would only bring in about 40 people. And that's been the key to our success, is we haven't tried to take too much money off the table. We haven't tried to, we haven't put the money ahead of the service. And what's enabled us to scale so well is we didn't lose sight of doing what we do well. And so rather than selling 180 people and, taking another, 12 or 15 million off the table, we'll go, let's just take 3 million off the table. We'll say no to that other 9 million in business, but let's really deliver this well. And let's find out the ceilings, okay, of the scale that we're at to be able to help this many clients. Let's find out what those problems would be. Okay, let's fix them and solve them, so then we can grow the group even more. And then we can grow the group even more. And so, we've done in our business what we teach other businesses to do, which is to scale consciously. How do you scale? Not consciously necessarily from a spiritual context, but consciously from the perspective of, are you aware of all of the functions and the dynamics within your business and the motives within your business that drive growth? And you've seen it many times before. Businesses that scale too quickly, in most cases, can, they can incinerate. They can, turn into a ball of flames. And other businesses that scale too slowly, they'll miss the opportunities. So it's how do you scale at a rate that enables you to grow in line with the value that you're delivering to the market? And, and that's the thing. If you look at our K2 Elites, they're perfect examples. We have about 1 in 3 of those that will 2x to 10x in their first 18 months to 2 years with us. And these are $500,000 to $50 million businesses. The biggest business we've got in there is $300 million. These aren't $1 businesses that we're turning into $100 and going, oh, 100x the client's business. I'm the best business coach in the world. I don't even use my startup case studies or testimonials. We do work with some startups in some cases, but the majority of the businesses that we work with, they're established. They're doing, 250 to 50 mil, 250,000 to 50 mil, or in some cases more. They've got maybe one-man band or, 3,000 people in their team. And regardless of where they're at, we show them how to do it really effectively. And that's what we've done ourselves, is just eat our own dog food, eat our own breakfast cereal.
Yeah. In other words, you're being incredibly authentic, and that's what the promise you made to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
95.5.
The interesting thing too is for me watching and listening to you now, as well as hearing the stories, that you're almost like getting that guy following you around because you're almost like you're channeling something else.
Absolutely.
And because what happened on stage to you after your stroke, and obviously having Matthias following around and recording you is revealing authenticity, is that channel. I find this fascinating, and you continue to be incredibly authentic. So maybe that's where I'm aware of your time and know you've got a big business to run. And look, I'm just honoured to have you as a friend, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I'd look forward to catching up with you. I'm planning a road trip to Byron Bay, so I believe that's where you're actually.
This is where I've positioned myself just prior to COVID hitting. Yeah, I moved up to Byron Bay. Wanted to live here for 20 years. All it took was a pandemic to get me here.
Okay.
Yeah, but which has been supported by going remote, obviously.
Okay. So actually, before we finish up, I just wanted to touch on this. Let's dive into the pandemic business model that you've got now.
Yep.
Because I believe you're actually hiring and growing the business in the middle of this, and you actually left your quite big offices in the middle of Sydney and took a small team up to Byron Bay. Tell me a little bit about that before I think this is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm someone that gathers a lot of intelligence natively, and so COVID came on my radar January 7th. By January 19th, I'd ordered a couple hundred masks for my team because we're about to embark on a major 13-city tour. By January 24, we created our first bio-threat security response plan. And so then by the time, February and March rolled around, I was so far ahead of the curve. I was about 7 weeks ahead of most other businesses in terms of preparation, because I was already looking at what was going on in China. I was looking at what was going on in Spain and France, and I was on it 8 hours a day. Like I was literally 8 hours a day looking for information on what was going on. And so by the time COVID hit hard, like it hit in the middle of one of our events, and we were fully prepared. And so we shut a 400-person event down on day 2 of a 4-day event. We put all those people in their hotel rooms, and we pivoted the Star Casino ballroom into a broadcast studio in 1 hour and 46 minutes.
Wow.
And we continued to deliver the rest of the event at an incredibly high quality. But then through that process of it hitting, as we were talking to our clients, we got to coach our clients through the process of, okay, here's how we told our team. Here's how you tell your team. Here's how we told you. Here's how you tell your clients. And here's what we're doing, and here's what we've done. Let's create your Corona response plan right now. And that's where we came up with the 5 phases of Corona, and the 5 phases of working through what's happening right now. And so we literally decided on I think it was a Thursday afternoon at 6 p.m. that we were going to have to look at a remote construct. And then by Friday, 5 p.m., we were ready to go. We didn't have to pull the trigger because no one had pulled the trigger at this point, but until I think the following Wednesday, Thursday, I think the rest of the world or Australia pulled the trigger. We pulled the trigger Monday morning. And so we had a fully remote workforce within about, let's call it 24 hours. In terms of being able to work remote. Didn't have to at that point lay anyone off. We've continued to hire through the pandemic. And like everyone else, we've taken a significant hit. We took a $2 million hit based on forward revenue in March. I think in total revenue down, we're probably down, close to 8 figures in terms of growth revenue. But at the same time, we've created new revenue streams, and we've maintained existing revenue streams that have, in most cases, in other businesses that are live event businesses, would have completely dried up. And so for us, COVID, like everyone, it's been a challenge, but I'm built for this shit. I love going to war, figuratively speaking. I love having my back up against the wall, because that's when I do my best work, Jeff. Like, honestly, when COVID hit, my team were like, holy shit, we thought you were fucking intense, but now you're a whole nother level of intense. Cause I was like clear, I was on point, and everyone else, none of my team had the time to freak out. And none of the team wanted to freak out, because why does Kerwin look so calm? Why does Kerwin look so relaxed? Kerwin's got a fucking plan for everything. How the fuck does he think about this shit? And it's like, that's the gift of PTSD. The gift of PTSD is, you're constantly on guard, and you're thinking about worst case scenarios, and you're thinking, okay, well, if that worst case scenario, what would I do? That happens, what would I do? That happens, what would I do? And so as a result, I had about let's call it easily 50 different contingencies that we had ready to deploy the moment it hit. And when it did, I brought a small team up to Byron, and that was motivated by the fact that I was being given very strong messages to get the fuck out of Sydney. And I just listened, and I listened very hard. And we put our whole team remote. And so we brought a small team up to Byron here. And so through this whole pandemic, we've continued to grow. We're continuing to hire. Even though our forward revenue is down, you know, we're more than surviving. We are thriving, but we're having to do what everyone else is doing as well, which is reorganize. Because you've got to understand, we're a $25-30 million company that's a live events company. And so, most companies in our space right now are either sunk or in the process of sinking, whereas all we did was go complete digital pivot. How do we develop two things, a digital offering, but a broadcast model? Yep. And then we started looking at integrating old school broadcast tactics and new school broadcast tactics and old school programmatic content. And so we started looking at developing and delivering programmatic content, digital content, broadcast content. We're working through that process right now. And it's been it's just been phenomenal, because we've been talking about doing digital and doing broadcast for 4 years. And now it's just like, you got a gun at your head, man. You got to fucking do it. You got no choice. And I like that feeling. I like the feeling of not having a choice. I like the feeling of going, oh, live events. Oh, your business is fucked. Really? Let me show you. Let me show you how I'm going to become even. And as a result, now we used to only be able to service clients in Australia and New Zealand and people who are willing to travel from Europe, which was maybe, 100, 150 a year. And now we've got hundreds of clients from all over the world that are now able to attend our events through broadcast, and attend our high-level K2 Elite through broadcast. And so we've got some other digital products in the pipe right now in the offerings, but our goal is just to move. We move quickly by being efficient. We are lean, but we're not cheap. And we just maintain those principles. And, now is not the time to stop using the basics. Now is not the time to go away and going, okay, the dynamic, yes, the market has changed. Yes, things have changed, but it doesn't, if you look at Federer, when he's down, if he's down, let's say it's break point and he's down, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't change his game. He goes and sticks with his fundamentals, because, as long as I stick with the fundamentals, okay, it's a probability factor. But the moment I start experimenting with new shots, I'm now playing with new probabilities that are going to be far less, because it's untried and untested. Mm-hmm. And if you look at any great sportsman, any great fighter, the way that they win is when their back's against the wall, they stick to the basics. And then when they see the opportunity, they pounce. And, I'm not someone who's looking for an opportunity to pounce by any stretch. I'm like everyone else. I'm wanting to find, how do we thrive in an environment where our business is based on helping people? And so my goal right now, and this is evidenced by our K2 Elites. We've had, of our 400 plus K2 Elites, we've had, I think, 7 that have gone into some form of hibernation, meaning they've scaled right back. And that's the beauty of knowing how to scale up. You also got to know how to scale back without, blowing a business up, because most businesses can scale up, but when it comes to, scaling back, they're like, well, how do you scale back? It's like an accordion. If you know how to scale up efficiently, you'll know how to scale back effectively as well. And we've had maybe 7 clients go into hibernation. We haven't lost one K2, not one of our high-end clients has actually gone under. We now have services and trades businesses that are having record quarters and record months. Yep. We have live events companies that are having record months, record quarters. In a situation where people in the exact same industries are going, oh, we're fucking doomed because I'm a tradie, I can't do what I do. Yeah, well, now you can do, quotes over Zoom. Now you can do, you can do broadcast events. There's so many options available. It's just having the mindset to be open to thinking about the one that's going to work and not stopping until you find that.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically this has accelerated your evolution as a company, because it's actually pushed you into a digital world that you've been thinking about and have been doing, but on a small scale.
Dude, I have sucked so bad at digital, and you probably know this better than anyone. Like, yes, I've got great social presence. We do social well, but we've sucked really bad when it comes to digital. But now, within a matter of 3 months, we're now one of the world leaders in terms of the quality. We're still catching up in terms of offerings and everything else. But in terms of, like, even right now, the quality of our podcast, the quality of, everything we do, it's the technology, the software. We're not doing everything by halves. Everything we're doing, we're going, right, and that's our motto. We don't do anything unless it's world class. And even in a situation like this, that's a fundamental that we don't shift. I don't want to I didn't want to do what everyone else was doing, which is to do, webinars where you're delivering an event to webinar. So, well, no, I'm going to build a fucking studio in my house. Okay. I'm going to speak to Telstra. I'm going to fucking get a satellite if I have to. I'm going to bring in a production team. I'll move them up to fucking Byron if I have to. And we're going to build a studio in my house that's broadcast ready so that we can broadcast anywhere in the world, anytime, for any reason for what we do. Yeah. And that's just enabled us to do it at a level where, yes, other people are pivoting with digital, but most people aren't pivoting with digital in a quality way. They're doing it in most cases, a fast way. And as I said, this comes down to one of our philosophies, which is one of our values. We're lean, but we're not cheap. And so we will negotiate every number, but we won't invest in shit. I'll spend more money for quality because I know quality is going to last longer.
Mm. Now, I'm curious about, you mentioned the 5 phases of coronavirus.
Yes.
So I'm very curious, what is that?
Well, phase 1 is you need to identify, you're going to be pulling on me now. It's like 3 months old. That's now an old piece of content. Well, phase one is all about scale back. It's about identifying all the excess in costs. So for us, phase 1 is really about identifying all the excess costs to be able to trim the fat. And then phase 2 is being able to have a redundancy plan. And so the first thing that we did when Corona came in, or when we saw it coming in, is we went, right, streamline all costs. Where can we pull, all spending from that is non-required spending, non-essential spending, everything cut. Phase 2 was, what does a talent scale back look like? So we went through the whole company, including me, all the wages and everything else. We went, right, okay. And that was a 4-phase project. If we do have to scale back, what will be phase 1 redundancies? What will be phase 2 redundancies, phase 3 redundancies, phase 4 redundancies? So phase 1, I'm starting to confuse. Let's call it step 1 of the Corona plan is get all the contingency, get all your costs streamlined.
Yep.
Step 2 is looking at the 4 phases of redundancies, or 4 phases of scaling talent back.
Scaling down.
What is scaling that down? And then step 3 was really about then looking at what does that look like to be in what does operational look like from a hibernation or a crawling perspective. And then phase 4 was shutdown. What does a shutdown look like? Because for some businesses, I have had some businesses, none in our clients, but I've had some businesses that have come to me from a consulting perspective and said, what should I do? And I say, right now, the best thing you could do is preserve capital and shut down.
Yep.
Going to be unfortunate. You're going to let go of some of your team members. You're going to lose some good talent. But if you keep going, you're going to lose them anyway, because your business, based on where it is right now, is non-productive.
Yep.
And that's where step 3 is. Step 3 is pivot. Step 3 is, what does the pivot look like? Where are the digital opportunities? And then step 4 is, really looking at that aspect of, here we go. He's got it up here. All right, go to phase 1. We'll start this piece again.
Okay.
Thank you, legend. All right, we'll start this piece. Well, the 4 phases, let me tell you right now. Here we go. This is more effective. This is where my brain injury loves to show. Well, phase 1 is going remote. So what does a remote workforce look like?
Yep.
In the context of your business? Because, live events company, how does a live events company look remote? So phase 1 is, you got to go remote. You got to look at what that looks like. Phase 2 is streamline. That's where we're looking at all the excessive costs that need to be cut back. Phase 3 is drastic. That's where we go, okay, what does hibernation, pause, or shutdown look like?
Yep.
Because our goal at this point is to, if we have to go into shutdown, we will, to preserve capital so we can come back. Because if we spend all of our capital trying to survive in an environment where we can't, we're not going to be able to come back from that, or coming back is going to be a lot harder. And then phase 4 is wind up. If you do need to wind up, what does that look like? And some people are like, I just don't even want to think about it. I'm like, fucking think about it now, because you want to think about what a wind up point, what is the milestone? What is the trigger point for a wind up? Because again, if you're going to wind up, it's better to wind up so that you still got some money in the bank than winding up and you got nothing left and you're being evicted and you've now got to go and get food stamps and everything else. And then phase 5 is bounce back, which is, okay, now we've come to the other side. How do we then scale up in an effective, in an efficient way? Because again, and this comes down to understanding the scaling process. Scaling is multidimensional, because we scale up, we also scale back. And if you're not prepared for the scale back, okay, it's going to be very difficult. But once we've scaled back, we then need to be prepared and ready to know what are the milestones to then scale up again, and look for those opportunities. Geez, I fucking carved that up like dog food in.
Well, when the
two different phases.
Yeah, well, he opened up that. I was curious. I'm a curious cat.
I did open that right up.
I said 5 phases because this is what people are going to know about, right? This is what people want to know. It's like, okay, what are the 5 phases? So I'm glad.
The funny thing is, this piece of content was created when I was at the event, when we were in the middle of a shutdown, and someone says, "So what do I do?" And I said, "You know what? There's 5 things you need to do." And I literally made every single one of those up on the spot. But it was so popular, we've developed an ebook for it now. There's an ebook. We've got a little video course on it and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the problem of creating so much content. I forget more than I know.
That's awesome. I'm sorry to put you on the spot quite like that, but
no, that's fine.
I thought you'd nail it and scale it in that particular one. But
I floored it and fucked it, mate. Don't that
one. Mate, thank you very much. That was an awesome way to finish off there, I think, in terms of what people can do to actually survive and thrive during this time. And, mate, thank you very much for spending the time with me, and I'm sure the listeners are going to have a great experience with this. And
lots of laughs as well.
Okay, we was, mate. Yeah, so right into fax broadcasting and doing that sort of shit.
And thanks to you, because I know we met quite a number. It was about 7 years ago now, and I still remember being quite in awe of the work you had done, the blog you'd created, and the notoriety and the demand that you'd created for everything you've done. And you really have led the way for many other people like me in the social space and the direct marketing space. So thanks for reaching out, Jeff, and make sure you reach out when you get to Byron.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to go on a road trip to Byron, and I'm going to knock on your door and maybe be wearing a mask, but maybe not, hopefully. But yeah. Thanks, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to catching up soon.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff.